Once upon a time, there was a poor young man who lived deep in the mountains. One day, this young man went into the forest to gather some medicine herbs. As he walked deeper into the woods, he saw a small clearing, and in the center of the clearing stood a white fox. The white fox was very beautiful. Seeing the young man looking at her, she did not run away. She walked slowly towards him and rubbed against his legs like a domestic cat. Then she turned around and barked twice before running back to the forest. Curiosity got the better of him, so he followed after her. The young man walked for about half an hour before he heard the sound of running water, and when he looked up, he saw a beautiful waterfall in front of him. But what caught his attention was that there were two entrances on both sides of the waterfall. On the left side, it was pitch black and dark. You couldn't see anything. But on the right side, there was a faint light coming from inside. He didn't know where the white fox had gone, but he walked through the right entrance because he was curious. After passing through the entrance, the young man found himself in a spacious cave. In the middle of the cave was a huge pool filled with sparkling water, and sitting by the pool were two beautiful women. Both of them had pointy fox ears on their heads, and they were both extremely attractive. The young man was stunned by the sudden appearance of the two beauties. Before he could say a word, one of the women spoke up. "Who are you? How did you get here?" Her voice was sweet and melodious, like the sound of nature. Startled out of his wits, the young man stammered. I'm just a hunter who lives outside the mountain. I saw a white fox just now and wanted to catch it, but it brought me here." The woman frowned slightly and said, "You want to catch my sister? What a vicious and unkind thing to say. If you don't leave now, I will make you regret it." The young man was taken aback by her fierce look. He raised his hands in defense and said, I don't mean any harm. I just want to catch the white fox. If you let me go now, I can pretend that today's events never happened." The woman snorted coldly and said, "Leave? You want to leave after causing trouble here? You're dreaming." The young man was so frightened that he started to plead, "Please forgive me. I really have no ill intentions. I can leave right now, without any delay." But the woman shook her head and said, "No, you can't leave. My sister has already decided that you will stay here for 3 years. 3 years later, we will decide your fate based on your performance over these 3 years. The young man was stunned and exclaimed, 3 years? But why? And what do you mean by performance?" The woman looked at him with a strange expression and said, "You'll know in the future. As for staying here for 3 years, if you perform well during these 3 years, maybe we can consider letting you go. Otherwise, don't blame us for being merciless." After that, they both stood up. One of them pointed her finger towards the entrance of the cave and said, "Go out now and wait for us at the entrance of the cave for 1 month. We'll decide then whether or not to let you stay here." With that, the two women disappeared. The young man hesitated for a moment, but ultimately decided to wait. A month passed quickly. One day, the two women came out of the cave again. They looked at the young man and asked, "Are you willing to stay here for 3 years?" The young man nodded firmly and said, "I'm willing." The woman smiled slightly and said, "Very well, we agree to let you stay here for 3 years. During these 3 years, you must not tell anyone about the place you have seen. Otherwise, even if you swear to death, we won't let you leave." The young man hurriedly agreed. Then they brought the young man into the cave and began to explain the rules to him. "There are many precious treasures in our cave, but you're not allowed to touch them. If you accidentally break something, you'll have to compensate us. Also, you must do your best to serve us, cook food, and so on. Can you accept these conditions?" The young man naturally agreed to all of these conditions. Afterwards, the two women took the young man to a quiet place to rest. At night, they slept together on a big rock. Although they were both women, they didn't sleep together. Each woman slept with the young man on different nights. Every night, one of them would sleep with the young man, and every 3 days they would switch. This continued for more than a year, and the young man didn't dare to slack off at all during this period. Not only did he have to work hard to serve the two women, but he also had to endure their constant teasing. One night, the woman who was sleeping with the young man suddenly sat up and said, "Hey, let me ask you, do you hate men?" The young man was taken aback and replied, "Why do you ask that?" The woman said, "Just tell me, do you hate men?" The young man hesitated for a moment and finally shook his head and said, "I don't hate men. Why do you ask that?" The woman seemed to be very disappointed and lay back down without saying a word. This incident made the young man feel puzzled. He tried to talk to the woman, but she ignored him. Later, he learned from the other woman that his answer had disappointed them, and they had decided to absorb all of his blood essence after the 3 years had passed. In order to avoid any suspicion, the two women became extra cold towards the young man, making him feel very uncomfortable. However, he knew that if he didn't keep working hard to serve them, they might decide to absorb his blood essence ahead of schedule. So he could only endure silently. Time passed quickly, and soon it was the 3rd year. The two women looked at the young man and said, "It's time to fulfill our agreement. We will absorb your blood essence today." The young man was not afraid at all. He had been mentally prepared for this for a long time. At this moment, the woman who had slept with the young man for 3 years suddenly said, "Wait, I want to ask you one last question." The young man nodded and said, "Ask away." The woman hesitated and finally asked, "Do you love me?" The young man was stunned. He never expected that she would ask such a question. After a moment of silence, he nodded and said, "Yes, I love you." The woman's face turned pale and she fainted on the spot. The other woman immediately went over to check on her and asked anxiously, "Hey, what's going on? Quickly use your spiritual power to help her stabilize her injuries." After a while, the woman who was checking her pulse said, "She's fine. She just lost consciousness due to excessive blood loss. Hurry up and bring some water." Afterwards, they carried the unconscious woman into the pool to take a bath. When the water temperature rose, the woman gradually regained consciousness. The woman who had been taking care of her asked, "Hey, are you okay now? What's going on? Why did you suddenly faint?" The woman shook her head and said, "I don't know. It seems that I haven't slept well these past few days and my body felt a little weak. I'll be fine after resting for a while." The woman who had slept with the young man for 3 years seemed to remember something important. She suddenly stood up and said, "Wait, I remembered. These 3 years, have you ever thought about leaving this place?" The other woman nodded and said, "I thought about it, but I gave up because I knew that even if we left, we still had to come back. There was no point in wasting our time." The woman who had slept with the young man for 3 years suddenly burst out laughing. She said, "I finally understand now. It turns out that the two of us have fallen in love with him. No wonder I felt a sense of uneasiness these past few days." Her sister nodded and said, "Me too. I thought it was because we were about to absorb his blood essence tomorrow. But now it seems that I was actually reluctant to part with him." The two sisters looked at each other and smiled. The next morning, the two foxes transformed into their human forms and told the young man that they were going to marry him. The young man was overjoyed and readily agreed. After the marriage, the two women followed the young man out of the mountains and lived together in a small village. They lived happily until they grew old.